Hi everyone, this is Sam Black, continuing my set review of Crimson Vow, informed by 17 lands, and we are on red, starting with a Braid and Flame Blast Bolt, which currently have identical game and hand win rates. Um, these cards are both great removal spells that you should put in your red decks and are reasons to get into red if you like are looking for a color to get into. They're not like, bombs that you should switch into red for or whatever, but they're, obvious like this is what I would expect the best common to look like. Uh, and the trade-off of cost one less mana and exiles something versus cost one more mana and hits bigger creatures and can hit artifacts apparently washes out to they're identical. You like because what your opponent's deck is matters more than what your deck is for which one is better. It's very hard to say like, oh, if you're this kind of deck, you should prioritize that one, and if you're this kind of deck, you should prioritize that one. There's like a little bit of that where I think that in general, um, cheaper, more narrow removal is better in control decks because it's like killing small creatures so that you don't die is more, and you extend the game to the point where you live and you take over is more valuable. Whereas in aggressive decks, you want your removal spells to allow you to attack and to deny your opponent the virtual card advantage that comes from having a single high toughness creature that can stop multiple small attackers from getting through, which means that theoretically a Braid would be better in aggressive decks and Flame Blast Bolt would be better in control decks, but this is not analogous to the white cards where I expected that to be a significant gap. Um, the two cards are so close in effect and what they can kill that I think that they should be viewed more or less interchangeably. Um, Falconrath Celebrants is the third best performing red common. 4/4 Menace for 4 is a very respectable body that matters significantly, and 2 blood is a lot of blood. This is, I mentioned, we talked about the wedding security that 5 mana 4/4s that don't do anything when they enter the battlefield often underperform relative to how dominant they can be when whatever other text they have happens. Um, Falconrath Celebrants gives you meaningful value up front, such that whatever happens to it, those 2 blood are gonna help you out. So it's good. In fourth place, Voldaren Epicure. This one was a surprise to me. While I understand that one drops are very good in this format, and I was not at all surprised by the success of Traveling Minister and the Lantern Bearer, I did not expect this. Mm. I do think that this is kind of an objectively powerful magic card. I've suggested playing it in modern, where like having a reliable discard outlet is very powerful. But I kind of thought that this would be too many low value things and it wouldn't end up amounting to a card. It turns out that it, according to the stats, just does. Blood is pretty valuable. The 1/1 is a nice thing to be able to exploit with or to enable the alluring suitor or just to do extra damage, pressure your opponent, whatever. Obviously, also helped by the fact that when you have blood in your deck, if you draw this late, you can get rid of it. If you draw it early, it's doing some damage and pressuring your opponent and turning on your blood stuff. Turns out, as a package, it's better than I thought it would be. Reckless Impulse. Light Up the Stage is a strong card. Has seen a lot of constructed play. This is no hoops, 1 extra mana for the same effect. pretty reliable source of card advantage in red. You obviously want to be a little bit careful in terms of like what the average and total and highest casting costs of cards are in your deck, and both in terms of like how you prioritize playing this and just like when you cast it. So both like when you draft it, when you play it, when you cast it, all that's informed by the other cards in your deck and their casting cost. Obviously, this generally plays better the lower your curve is, the fewer instants you have, especially plays horribly with every counter spell, and then plays badly with most expensive cards most of the time. So you don't necessarily want this in all red decks. Use caution, but it is pretty powerful. It has some amount of awkwardness with werewolves, where it is likely to be day when you are using Reckless Impulse, but that might be fine, especially if you're more wolfy rather than werewolfy. I think the like red green low curve wolf deck is pretty happy with this card. Blood Petal Celebrant. This card just seems pretty good. 2/1 for a striker is solid. You only get that on offense, but that's what you wanted to be doing anyway. And making blood is great. This does it pretty easily. Obviously, you don't get it up front, but this thing will, it's not going to be too hard to get this thing to die. Fearful Villager. I'm a little surprised by how good this thing's stats are, given how bad. Basically, given that it's a worse version of Shady Traveler, which didn't have good stats in the previous set, but context matters. There are more things that care about werewolves in this set, weirdly enough. And red is just a little bit better. And, well, more than a little bit better. Red is a lot better. And this is a fine aggressive red card. Belligerent Guest. I expected Belligerent Guest to be better than Fearful Villager. Maybe that's just because I expected Fearful Villager to be bad because of the comparison to Shady Traveler, whereas Belligerent Guest was excited about Trample and making blood. Turns out it's the other way. Okay. I think, the more removal you have, the more tricks you want to play, the more Belligerent Guest improves. Also, obviously, the more you're doing with blood, vampires and stuff. Hungry Ridge Wolf. This card is, good to, well, fine to very good, depending on how many wolves you have. Bloody Betrayal. I think that you don't want to play this if you don't have ways to sacrifice the things that you take, but I have certainly lost to this card when red-white decks just stole my stuff and bashed me. The blood token obviously is somewhat significant in terms of like how punished you get for using this thing just for damage value. I wouldn't be surprised to learn that it is correct to play this in some decks that can't ever sacrifice the creature they steal. Sure Strike is, a fine trick when you're trying to attack a lot. Kessig Flame Breather is an acceptable source of like persistent damage if you have a lot of things that trigger it. Probably at its best in blue-red. Again, largely that's because of blue-red kind of not having great 2-drops most of the time. Ancestral Anger. I played one deck that was mono red, where I played 4 of these with 3 or 4 Kessig Flame Breathers and 4 Reckless Impulse, and I played 15 lands, and that deck didn't do especially well. It had the issue that with only 15 lands, I would like sometimes not have enough, despite the fact that my curve was really low, and that kind of seemed like it should never happen. I had almost nothing that cost more than 2 mana, but whatever. But more importantly, even with 15 lands, because I had so much air in my deck, I could still flood out. The biggest problem with Ancestral Anger is it's very hard to avoid having that problem where you have too much air and so you flood out when you try to play a lot of these in a limited deck, because your limited deck is most likely 2 colors and doesn't have dual lands, and so you have to play a high land count to make your colored mana work. And when you play a high land count and a lot of cantrips, you flood out. And blood can help mitigate that, but only so much. And so that's the biggest problem with trying to go deep on Ancestral Anger. Lacerate Flesh. Generally don't like 5 mana sorcery speed removal spells that don't kill anything. This one I'm a little bit okay with sometimes because making blood tokens is pretty nice, but not a very strong card. Pyrospawn. I've played this in sealed. It was okay. It's not particularly good. It's a lot of mana. It's whatever. Lightning Wolf. Read's kind of okay, but cards are just a little bit better than this now. It doesn't do enough up front. Daybreak Combatants, again, just pretty weak card. Not embarrassing to have to put in an aggressive deck. It seems like it should be. This is actually another kind of victim of training being bad. The thing that this aspires to do is let you train, because you get a high power thing that's attacking immediately. But the problem is that the card that you're left with here is so bad that even if you got to do that, the end result isn't very good. And then also the training cards that this wants to work with aren't good. Weary Prisoner, this card is mostly really bad. I think it can be fine in blue-red specifically, where you're more likely to get value out of the 2/6 defender, and where it's very easy to get to nighttime. End the Festivities. You should never put this in the main deck. Uncommons. Alluring Suitor. This card's a complete joke. It's just like really, really strong. The fact that it doesn't need to attack itself is just like, I don't understand, both from a power level standpoint and flavor standpoint. I've heard some flimsy justifications. I don't like them. I think that I don't know anything about what people are currently playing in Standard with this set, but I do think that if there's like a reasonable aggressive red deck, this is a great card for it. Like, you just go turn 1 guy, turn 2 guy, turn 3, play this, attack with both, flip it, get your mana back. And then you have this like 1 mana 3/3 trampler that threatens to grow stuff and everything. But that's neither here nor there for a limited set review. Anyway, this card in limited is awesome because it gives you this like mana jump. Usually you don't flip this on turn 3. Usually you flip it on turn 4 or whatever, when it attacks itself. And then the mana lets you play something like that you didn't have the mana to cast otherwise. And then also, like, it's pretty easy to be able to attack with it because of the pump ability, and the mana it gives you to use the pump ability means that usually you're just like trading something at worst. And yeah, really, really strong. Pumps other stuff without needing to like get into combat itself later and all that. Rending Flame, great removal spell. Voltaic Visionary, good aggressive card that also has this like value mode. Vampire's Vengeance. Wouldn't expect this to be quite this high, though. Obviously, if you like, this can be amazing, and if you're playing vampires, you can discard it when it's bad. Yeah, so I would expect this to be good. I would have guessed that it was worse than Ballista Watcher, basically, but I guess it is played less, so maybe it's a little bit more narrow in terms of like you only want it in vampire decks, and then it's good or whatever. I don't know. Ballista Watcher is really strong. It's very easy to, when you want to use this thing multiple times, you just pass and then you can do it. And when you use it multiple times, it takes over a game. And then it's just like the opportunity cost here is pretty low. Like 4 mana 4/3 isn't good, as we see with Lightning Wolf, but it's not like embarrassing to spend 4 mana for a 4/3. And then like everything about what this is doing when it's in play is very impactful. Markov Retribution, you have to be pretty vampires-y, but then it's removal spell plus like mini Trumpet Blast, which is pretty strong. Sanguine Statuette. Again, you have to be pretty deep on blood for this to work, and even then, it's not like as aggressive as it looks. Like this isn't in any way like a 3/3 haster for 2 because you have to spend mana to activate it, and even if you have a lot of blood, you have to have a card that you're willing to discard to use the blood to like be able to attack with it. But blood is pretty valuable, and a 3/3 is pretty good for 2 mana. So I think that it's playable in some vampire decks, though, even though we see the 55% game in hand win rate for this, which is good relative to some of the other colors we've looked at. Note that it does have the like negative improvement when drawn. Like if we look at red commons, we see that 55% is like, wait, sorry, I moved to, wait, no. So 50, so that's like, around a Fearful Villager. So kind of like filler type level, which is about what I'd expect. It's not bad to have to play this, but it's certainly not a card you should be taking highly or excited about. Runebound Wolf, largely just a 2/2 for 2. I have lost games to this thing doming me for 5 a turn. It is appreciably good in the like red-green wolf werewolf deck, but I don't think it's like the most exciting payoff card for that deck. Blood Hypnotist, can't block is a pretty big drawback. You have to be really, really sure that you are the aggressor to play this. If you're really, really, really sure, it seems like a fine aggressive card. I've never been this confident that I'm attacking. Lambhole, whatever, this thing, is not very good. It's just not enough impact. This is basically like a 4 mana version of the 2-drop that, like, if you get tonight, does more damage. I mean, two damage is a lot more than 1, right? Like, it's not because you're theoretically triggering multiple times. It's like twice as much damage, and it means that it actually matters if you're doing it or whatever. But it's also not enough to be worth jumping through a bunch of hoops for. Magma Pummeler, this is just very expensive. Honeymoon Hearse, wow. All right, that's interesting to note. I would have expected this to be a lot higher. When I've played against Honeymoon Hearse, it's been good for my opponents a few times. I've never put it in my own deck because I've never felt like I had enough creatures to use it. I think maybe what's happening is people are putting this in decks that like don't have enough creatures and can't use it well. I think if your creature count is very high, specifically you have a lot of cheap creatures, the ceiling on this card is like good. Like I do think that there are decks that want to play this, but I also think that those decks are like not most decks. Frenzied Devils, this card's not good. Just like too much mana, too many hoops to like still have a bunch of stuff to cast after you've done this. And like 2 small and shields are down and everything. And then Into the Night is 4 mana sorcery. I don't understand why you'd want to put this in your deck. Rares. Olivia's Attendance is very good. It takes over games quite easily. It makes grotesque amounts of blood. And it's also a 6/6 menace. Stensia Uprising is hard to deal with. This is a very persistent threat that also threatens to do a lot of damage. Pretty straightforwardly good card. Ill-Tempered Loner is really, really annoying to deal with when you are using red as your removal color. I did not realize the first time I played against this flipped that it triggers when any permanent you control is dealt damage, and the backside of this is really oppressive. The front side is also great. This is a really strong card. Creepy Puppeteer. This has stats that are like fine rather than amazing. Like it's worse than a Braid or whatever. But my little experience with it has been very good. Like it just cracks for a ton of damage when you, in its normal case, like if your opponent doesn't have blockers and you have one guy and you play this and smash for 8, it's a lot. And I've had good experiences in a small sample size personally with doing that. Kessig Wolf Rider. I mean, the opportunity cost here is very, very low. 1 mana for a 1/2 menace isn't an amazing card, but it's like a fine aggressive card. And then if you ever make any wolves with this, it's awesome. Dominating Vampire. A little surprised by how low the stats are on this one. Like, you get a 3/3 for 3 that has strict upside. I don't know what people are doing wrong with this. Maybe they're just like insufficiently willing to cast it on turn 3 when they like draw it. I don't know. This seems like it's better than a lot of cards with comparable win rates, though obviously, you know, there's some amount of it's a very restrictive rare that might lead to people like forcing. So the thing that's weirdest about this is it seems like the downside would be, oh, I drafted this, therefore I was too committed to red and too committed to vampires, and I ended up with a bad deck. But that doesn't explain the fact that it has a negative improvement on drawn, which just doesn't really make any sense to me for a 3/3 for 3. So I have to assume that it's some amount of this card is playing worse than Trained Armadon some portion of the time, which says to me that people should just be casting it a little bit more than they are. So my guess is if you have this thing and you don't have something else to do with your mana, and you're inclined to try to save it for value, that is very bad and you should play it. I don't know what else to say about this one. Curse of Hospitality. This reads like it might be fine if you're an aggressive deck. The stats tell me that it probably isn't. You should probably never play this card. Or roughly never. And then Change of Fortune is just like obviously wildly horrible. Mythics. Volatile Arsonist is very, very strong. The one time my opponent cast this, I immediately died. Maniform Hellkite is also very, very strong. Cemetery Gatekeeper is a good creature. It's not in any way a bomb, it's a good creature. Chandra Dressed to Kill. I have never seen this in play. The stats indicate that it's fine, which sounds totally plausible to me. It's difficult to protect. I don't think that this is like anywhere close to Sorin, but it does, like, you know, threaten to do some real stuff. And that is the end of the red review. You might notice that these are getting a little bit shorter. Hopefully, that's just a matter of, well, it is late and I'm a little bit pressed for time, so I'm trying to pick up the pace a little bit. Hopefully, we're not losing too much value here.